Hi, welcome to Upcycled, Crafted for a Purpose. Today we're going to talk about the chapter in the book Upcycled, Crafted for a Purpose by Bold Vision Books on Lifeless to Lightbearer. We can be light bearers and bear light and life even after we feel like we have no longer got anything to give if we surrender what we have and who we are to Jesus. The ultimate light of the world can infuse himself into us, dwell in us, and shine from us to beautify the world and bring his message of hope and redemption to the world. So this is the way that our ultimate upcycler changes our lives and gives us beauty and purpose even when we feel broken and worn. So today we're going to make a chicken tin wall lantern. Now, as odd as that sounds, this is going to be really cute when it gets done. And this is something that you can use from materials you might already have, and then add in a few little inexpensive things that you bring out from like the dollar store or maybe Goodwill or maybe Hobby Lobby. That's one of my favorite stores, and I went in there today and found more than I went in to go get. So sometimes it's fun just to have an opportunity to go to the store, and it's fun even more so to gather with friends and people that you're meeting for the first time to create something beautiful. So today, let me go through what the materials you'll need for this chicken tin wall lantern. Now, you can use either, I think that the baking sheets, the disposable baking sheets, they have to be thin enough that you can cut them. If you get a regular baking sheet, it's going to be really difficult to work with, maybe impossible to use for this project. Or you can use a ton of pie tins, but as you can see where I've already traced these, when you look at them, you'll see that they need to be a little bit larger. So one pie tin would make one flower petal on this project. Now obviously it's a chicken tin wall lantern, so you're going to need a used and washed out chicken tin. Now make sure you wash this out thoroughly, because the last thing you want is your fragrance when you light your candle is to be rancid chicken. So if you want to run it through the dishwasher, you can. I just washed it by hand, but I made sure I did it very thoroughly. You'll need something to put it on the wall with. You can use some kind of backer board that you like, maybe something that's an architectural piece that you bought from the antique shop, or something old that you're not using anymore. Hobby Lobby also sells some little backer boards or signs that you could buy. If you happen to have an old one that's left over from another project that you never used, you could use that as well. So just something that you're going to be able to mount this onto the wall with. I got some cheap frames from the local dollar store, and I'm going to paint these and fix them up and make them sturdy enough to use for this project. So you can use old frames. Now if you're using a frame from the dollar store, like in the mosaic project that we did before, you're going to need something a little sturdier to hold that chicken tin wall lantern to the wall than just the really flimsy cardboard that comes with it. So what I did was I had some old backer board. This is the same material that goes on the back of a piece of furniture, but you can buy it pretty cheaply at your local home improvement store. If you happen to have something left over that's a thin balsa wood, or a really, really strong cardboard would be just fine. Just make sure that it's strong enough to hold metal things to the wall. So that'll be your backer board. And you're going to also need a few tools. You'll need a hammer. You will need some brads, and these are pretty cheap. I just happen to have these laying around. And when you have the brads, you'll want to measure those brads against a nail. So find a nail that you happen to have. You only need one, but find one that's going to be the same width as the brad that is in your kit. So make sure that you have that. You're going to need some scissors for cutting out paper, and you'll need some industrial strength scissors that are good enough, that are strong enough to cut out metal. And you'll need something to cut the backer board with. I used a really heavy-duty utility knife, but you can maybe use a saw if you are using some wood, so you're probably going to need something else. You might want a ruler so that you can measure your placement of your chicken tin. you will want to create a template. So some cardstock, I didn't happen to use cardstock, but that is best for making any kind of stencil or template. A thicker piece of paper. You can print these. I printed mine, I kind of cheated and did it online, or you can use a protractor and measure it and then just create an arch. If you want to do it that way, you can. I just sort of found one and printed it from online. You will need some paints if you want to paint it. You might want to leave it just bare metal if that's your decor, is just to have that kind of rustic tin look in your decor at home or for the person that you're donating it to. I'm going to choose to paint mine so that we can do that extra step. So choose those colors that you like, and then anything that you want to embellish it afterwards. And you can find ribbons at your dollar store, so that's a neat little tip. And you'll need something to apply your paint with. And I like these craft brushes because they're disposable. If you're worried about the environment, you can also use something like an old rag and wrap it around something. It's not as even. You could use a craft paintbrush as well. That will work. You're just going to have to rinse it out when you're done. And it doesn't create an even stroke. It kind of creates brush strokes on things. So it depends on the look that you're going for. So those are our materials. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is create your template. I've already created mine, and you'll cut it out evenly around the outside. Once you have your flower petal template, you'll notice that you're going to want the size of flower petal that will measure against your chicken tin so that it is the right size for the scale of the chicken tin. Now I'm choosing a large chicken tin so that my tea lights will fit nicely in it, but if you want to use a smaller one, you can if you're not intending to put actual tea lights in there. I would recommend looking for some tea lights, and I actually do have some in here that I found at the dollar store, believe it or not. I think I got these at the dollar store. They are battery operated LED lights, so they won't create any fire hazards. So if you're planning to use actual flame tea lights, the real tea lights, you're going to have to be careful all throughout this project to make sure you don't put anything flammable anywhere near your tea lights. So if you're using the chicken tin and you're not painting the inside of the chicken tin, then the metal in the inside of the chicken tin should be okay, as long as you don't have a lot of flammable glues and other things like that. So making sure that you have the right size and scale of petal, and you can kind of, as you're doing this, and this is why I recommended making sure that you have large enough surface area on your metal pieces that you're going to cut from. You're going to take any kind of writing utensil that will give you an impression on the metal, and you're going to go ahead and trace your templates onto the pie tins or baking sheets. And when you've got those all traced out, then you're going to actually go ahead and cut them. And as you can see, these are really not hard to cut out. But if you're working with children, or if you're worried about your own safety, you do want to be careful not to cut yourself on the sharp metal edges. In fact, when you have removed the top of your chicken tin, if you don't have a pop top like I did, you will have to be really careful about the metal edges. So I would recommend either using a pop top chicken tin or making sure that you use a can opener that creates clean edges that aren't razor sharp and jagged. So go ahead and cut out all of your flower petals. And if you think you might make an irregular edge, cut it slightly larger. Now I should probably be demonstrating this with gloves on, but notice how I'm being very, very careful not to get my fingers anywhere close to the edges of these flower petals. Now you're going to want to cut out, for the size chicken tin I have and the size petals, about 5 petals. and measure it so that you evenly space the number of petals around the outside of chicken tin, which is going to be the center of the flower in this lantern. So what I did was I used, just to backtrack a moment, I used the flimsy cardboard that came with the frame, and I measured what would look like the center. So because this frame was 8 by 10, I measured 8 inches, and I've kind of cut it on accident a little bit after cutting the backer board, so ignore this. But I looked at it, and 4 inches was the center that way, and 5 inches was the center that way, and I made a bullseye, and I tried to center my chicken tin, and then I just kind of figured how many of these could I evenly space to make the right size petals and the right number of petals. So I did that kind of ahead of time. And just keep in mind that your petals are going to overlap the chicken tin in the center, because you're going to put brads into the backer board here. And then your chicken tin is going to cover up the brads. Okay, just kind of give you a, this is the direction we're going. As you're doing this project, whether you're doing it together or with friends or by yourself, you can kind of have some worship music playing and remind yourself of the light of Christ that's coming into your life. Alright, so we have our petals all ready. The next step is to get them ready to be attached to the backer board. And one little piece of material that is optional that I did not mention is something to put underneath your surfaces when you're nailing things, so that you don't nail it through to your table or your craft board. So I always keep a craft mat underneath what I'm working on, just to keep my craft table clean. But if you're working with nails, obviously that's not going to be thick enough to prevent it from going through. So the next thing that you're going to want to do is measure the center of your backer board. There we go. Okay. So we sort of have a bullseye for what's going to be the center. And another way to do this is to measure on every side of the chicken tin to make sure that it's 2 inches by almost 3 inches by almost 3 inches. And you can get very precise if you like. That's totally up to you. So we've got kind of a bullseye there in the center. You can use a compass to do this. You can put a little string in the center and create an exact diameter. So that's another way to do that. You could also take the lid of your chicken tin and trace it if it's not a jagged lid. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to create places that are even on each of these, and decide where we want to put the brads. We're going to have one in the center to hold the chicken tin to the backer board, and then you're going to have one for each of the flower petals. When you look at where your flower petals are overlapping the circle, they should be overlapping just as much here as they do here. Your flower petals should be overlapping on each side of the flower petal over the edge of the circle equally. So make sure that there's not one edge of the flower petal so that the corners match. And then kind of tape them first so that you can make sure that they're going to be placed at equal distances around your circle. So when you see how they're equally placed, and when you're only taping it, you can kind of adjust it as you go around. So then just kind of look at where your chicken tin's going to go. Make sure you like how that looks. I kind of like that. I think that's cute. Eventually we're going to bend these a little bit. Give them sort of a bend. So don't worry about them looking kind of flat. Okay. The next step is that you're going to take your nail and you're going to kind of gently poke a hole in each of these little, right in the center of each one of these flower petals. It doesn't have to be exactly in the center. And at this point, you don't actually have to go all the way through the backer board. You just want to make a mark. And that way you're marking where you're going to put it. Give it enough room from the edge that it's not going to split the edge of the aluminum. But you don't really want to split the aluminum foil. But you want it to stay inside the circle so that it's covering, the wrap will be covered by the chicken tin. Alright, so this should, I'm just going to make sure this has gone all the way through. Okay. Make sure that each one has made a mark. And you're also going to make a mark at the bullseye here. So after you've got your flower petals done, then you'll go ahead and take a longer nail so that you can get through it. Actually, flip this over and find your center mark on your chicken tin. Making a mark. And then you're going to make a mark here. Okay. So we're just making these little guide marks so that we can actually put something under the backer board when we make the nail go all the way through. So I'm going to pause the recording because I don't need you to be on here while I'm nailing through the backer board. But what I will show you before I do that is that I'm going to be putting something under it and then finishing that. You could also use a drill if you happen to have a drill. What I have finished doing is I have finished pounding holes in this. You could use a drill. Like I said, that's perfectly fine. It's a little bit more efficient. But I already had the nail and I already had the hammer, so I didn't need to get out any more extra tools. And then what you'll do is you will actually take your petals where you have just kind of made a little dot, and you'll go ahead and poke through to make that hole a little bit bigger. Now for the backer board, I honestly needed to go with a bigger nail, so it's always good to have an extra nail that's just a size up nearby so that you can use it if you want to. You see how I'm carefully poking that through? And then I'm going to make sure that it fits on my backer board with the brackets. Now we're not going to fix them onto there exactly. Here, yes. The brads are a perfect fit for that size hole, and the one in the flower petal is going to be a little bit shorter. I mean, a little bit smaller hole. Okay, so the next step is actually painting this if you want to paint all of the pieces. So you want to protect your surface if you're using paint. I like to use, and I like to use acrylic paint. Just make sure, as always, if you're using adhesives or paints or anything that has a sense of fumes and needs to be ventilated, that you're working in a well-ventilated area, especially if you're doing this with a group. I'm going to paint this kind of a gray tone, and I already happen to have some gray. So it's the color that's in my decor. I'm going to leave my frame this color pretty much. You can choose to paint the frame too if you like. But I'm just going to coat my backer board. And after you have put paint on it, you want to kind of make sure that you have not covered your holes with paint. Poke a nail back through or a Q-tip to cover that up. So I'm covering this with gray. I think I'm going to do my chicken tin center yellow and do some streaks of gray. Alright, you can use some craft gloves if you want to kind of make sure that you don't end up getting paint on your hands. I usually like to do that. There, that just makes it so that you don't have gooey paint. It stays wet in there for too long. Acrylic and especially chalk paint will dry pretty quickly, so that's the nice thing about that. Set that aside to dry. And I think I'm going to use white on my petals. So choose which side of the petal you're going to face out. You don't have to do both sides the same color. You could do both sides a different color. You could only paint one color if you like. I'm going to leave this kind of streaky and let it remain a little bit reflective. Just letting it be a little hint of white, not worrying about it being perfect. Because I think it's okay for it to be streaky. It is a flower petal, after all. So I'm just going to thinly coat this with white paint. And you can do whatever you like. If you want a red flower or a blue flower, or whatever color you want, go for it. If you want it to be more opaque, feel free to do that as well. But I just like the shabby chic French country look for my decor, so I'm not going to worry about it being opaque. So then you'll leave it to dry, and we will come back for the final step of assembly. So are you excited? I'm excited. It's going to be beautiful. Just like you are going to be beautiful as God repurposes you. We're here to do the final steps, the assembly of our chicken tin wall lantern. And so we have all of these pieces are mostly dry. I'm going to go ahead and do this so that we can see what we're doing. I went ahead and hot glued some ribbon down the center of each one of these petals. I just thought that was so cute that way. And I also hot glued some ribbon that I had left over from another project around the outside of the center of the flower because I just thought that matched so nicely and it was really cute. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting the brads through. Now, just to let you know, I did actually paint the head of the brad that's going to go inside of the center of the chicken tin. So if you didn't do that, go ahead and do that with the same color that you painted in there if you did any painting. The ones for the petals aren't going to matter. And so with this type of ribbon, with a different type of ribbon, you might have to actually punch a hole in the ribbon, but this ribbon already has plenty of holes in it, so you don't have to do that. So just kind of put your brads through each one of your petals. Now, once you have these poked through your backer board, you'll flip it over to the other side and start securing your brads. We have punched through, I have gone ahead and made ribbon, glued ribbon over each one of the petals, and I have bradded the petals to the backer board, and I put the backer board inside the frame, and I have actually hot glued a ribbon around the outside of the chicken tin center and used the painted brad to put in the center and secure the chicken tin to the center of the frame. And that was all secured on the back, but I also reused the cardboard from inside the picture frame so that I have something to hang it with. Now, you don't have to reuse the cardboard. It's not the most secure, but I did hot glue it in and I have secured the frame around everything. And when I was done attaching it, I just sort of gracefully folded and bent each one of these petals to have them exactly how I want it. Which is really cute for a dorm room or a little girl's room. So I hope that you feel upcycled today and that you are now even more aware than ever of how God uses us even when we feel like we're ready to be cast off, thrown away, junked. We are not junk to our Father. Our Creator knows that we still have purpose and value and worth, and even the most unlikely things about us might be the very things that God chooses to make beautiful and make His mission message. These are great projects to donate to women's shelters or to places where people need extra hope, like say an addictions recovery facility or a children's home, or maybe you can go to a college ministry and you can donate these to some of the kids who feel alone and isolated from their families. There's a whole list of places where you can donate these crafts in Upcycled, Crafted for a Purpose.